So I started playing this game in 2018 about sailing around, digging up buried treasure, fighting skeletons, and engaging in piracy with or against other people. It's called Sea of Thieves. I jumped in with a group of friends around 3 months after the game released, and we were told by another person in our Discord server that we would get bored of it in about 3 days. Long story short, we didn't. But through the 100 or so hours that me and my crew clocked in that first couple of months, I kept hearing the same rhetoric over and over from the player base and reviewers. The game is too repetitive, there's not much to do, it's severely lacking in content, etc.
This never sat well with me, and it took me quite a while to come to grips with why that was, and then it hit me. Sea of Thieves isn't an island. It's a ship.
If you'll bear with me for a moment through that pretentious line, I'll explain. But first let's go back to the beginning. Sea of Thieves is a game developed by Rare Studios, the team behind all of these classic mainstays in gaming. It was originally announced back in 2015, and I actually had the opportunity to get my hands on it at E3 2016. I was, to put it lightly, very excited. Pirate video games are few and far between, and even then, a minority of them actually put the work in to have fleshed out sailing and ship-to-ship combat mechanics, which is arguably one of the pillars of fantasy piracy depicted in media like film. The game that we played on the show floor was fairly bare bones back then, a quick overview of the mechanics followed by a brief combat session against an opposing ship, in which neither ship ended up sinking in our case. The following year, it would be revealed that what was being thought of as a player versus player or PvP-centered game was actually going to contain some player versus enemy or PvE elements. This included things like stopping at different islands to loot barrels for resources, following maps to find buried treasure, and fighting off undead skeleton pirates trying to protect that loot. With the introduction of a broader scope of gameplay, Sea of Thieves was back on my radar and a lot of other people's radars with the promise of filling out a naval combat game with questing and rewards. It would be a short while after release that I decided to give it a shot, aided by the fact that the game is available through the Xbox Game Pass and the first month subscription price is just $1. That's not me shilling, by the way. In general, it was just a really solid deal to be able to spend a month trying out a game that I was hearing a lot of negative criticism about, a game that I was very interested in forming my own opinion on, all for the cost of an Arizona iced tea. And I think that in the first month, I actually shared some of those views while I got acclimated to the gameplay loop. Here's a rundown of how it works. The game revolves around session-based play. Every time you jump on, you're outfitted with a fresh ship that has a small stock of supplies. Your ship and crew are docked at one of the outposts, islands that are inhabited by shopkeepers and quest givers. From here, you're given no mandated direction, which can understandably leave players scratching their heads and searching for some drive or motivation. This is where voyages come in. You can grab a voyage from one of the 3 faction leaders on the island, based on your particular flavor for adventure. Once a voyage is started, maps appear in the crew's inventory indicating one or more islands to sail to in order to carry out the task at hand. Sometimes it's a map with an X marking buried treasure, or a riddle that must be solved to the same ends. Sometimes it's a skeleton captain with a bounty on their head that you have to hunt. And sometimes you have to get specifically colored chickens and pigs and bring them back to the senior merchant. Or skip those. I think we mostly skip those ones. Completing any of these quests will leave you with some treasure on board your ship, which you can then exchange at an outpost for gold. The gold allows you to buy any of the various cosmetic items for your ship or pirate, and that's basically the game. Sounds pretty straightforward when put like that, to a degree where it's understandable that somebody would say that the game feels empty. That is, of course, if you consider the bookends to be the most important part of the gameplay. Which I don't. Because remember, Sea of Thieves is not an island. It's a ship, and by that I mean everything in the game is built to facilitate the journey and not the destination. Somebody out there can probably enjoy this game by just sailing to an island, grabbing the treasure, and sailing back to turn it in, but that's not what it's all about. It's literally painted on the wall over at Rare Studios. Players creating stories together. The game isn't about digging up treasure and turning it in for gold. It's about the storm you had to sail through to get there. The cannonballs fired from an island cannon that wiped 2 of your crew off the deck and forced you to repair and anchor the ship alone while taking fire. The skeleton with a powder keg that nearly killed you while you were searching for the chest. And the other players that arrived on the island while you were digging and nearly sank you. That's the story. That's your unique story to your play session. Sea of Thieves is a game about giving you objectives that will, by definition, force you to cross paths with other players or environmental threats, and giving you the tools to handle these situations in ways that would ultimately be worth laughing about or reminiscing about afterwards. Whether it be an intense battle that your crew barely succeeds in, or a spectacular string of failures that leaves the whole party crying with laughter, the game first and foremost wants you to create stories.
It's a bold idea and an even bolder pitch for a product. Leaving most of the fun in the hands of the players can be a scary prospect and can have a lot of perceptual consequences. Consequences that ultimately befell the game at launch and have stuck around since then.
It's unfortunate that you can still hear the sentiment of Sea of Thieves as an empty and repetitive game being passed around even these days. I think this is primarily because the game's ever-evolving nature being a little undersold in publications and review spaces, thus not giving the massive updates and additions to the game the limelight or credit that I personally believe that they deserve. Sea of Thieves was always planned to be supported long after release, and that support factored into keeping me coming back even a year later. From a world with some islands and voyages, 2 ship models for 2 or 4 player crews, and some skeletons to fight and treasure to dig up, came a wave of additions that repeatedly breathed new life into the gameplay loop and the world itself. First came the Hungering Deep, adding the fearsome and titanic Megalodon as a special boss fight that required you to team up with another crew and sail to her lair to summon her up with a full Alliance sea shanty. At least that's how it started. After the window for this event was over, they let Meg loose on the whole map, breaching behind ships to frighten every new player setting sail, while at the same time tuning her difficulty so that singular crews could fight her. And then was the Cursed Sails, which brought forth a fleet of ghost ships from the sea in an alternate raid that was fully based on open water ship combat. In addition, the ghost ships would come equipped with cursed cannonballs. These had special effects when fired, such as forcing a ship to anchor or making the entire crew on board drunk. This added a lot of strategy and nuance to the ship combat. These cursed cannonballs would be available to find randomly in barrels alongside other resources, and added a lot of possibilities when fighting other ships, leveling the playing field for smaller crews to be able to pack a punch against more oppressive and bigger ships. And after this update, ghost ships were, like Meg, allowed to roam the seas and Davy Jones style rise from the depths to hunt down players. On top of all that, a 3rd ship variant in the Brigantine was added to the game for 3-player crews, splitting the difference between the galleon and sloop in regards to maneuverability and combat power. And then the Forsaken Shores were opened up. The main map is built in regions, which have unique watercolors and aesthetics and themes, and an entirely new one was added to the game. This region, the Devil's Roar, was littered with volcanic islands that would occasionally spew flaming rock out and spray steaming water from geysers on shore to complicate the voyages surrounding them. The catch was that the loot obtained here would be Ashen loot, which effectively doubled the value in gold. All of these new islands posed an interesting challenge, with the promise of a very valuable return if you can brave the rain of fiery boulders and boiling water. And to aid you against that boiling water, a new rowboat was added that you could dock to the back of any ship, allowing loot transportation in dire conditions and also giving more utility to moving large amounts of treasure, like when looting a fort or offloading at an outpost. Following this came some minor updates that added more character to the game, with the Festival of the Damned and the Shrouded Spoils. The first primarily focused on giving out a unique lantern light color depending on cause of death, with a hunt for beacons around the world to light up this spectrum of colors. The second added fog banks as a weather condition, reducing visibility to a point that made sailing from point A to point B dangerous in its own right, as well as a spectrum of new megalodons, a revamped kraken, and more frequent forts and ship raids. And this isn't even to mention things like the Skeleton Exploder mini-event that saw a surge in powder keg skeletons on every island, or the Mermaid Cursebreaker event that added destructible statues that would appear in the shallows, and a lot of the stuff eventually got loaded up with some really tangible gold rewards. Meg and Karen can drop loot that only appears from skeleton ships or fort raids. Mermaid statues drop gems that can be sold to any merchant, allowing players to turn them in and gain reputation for a faction that they don't voyage for that often. Powder kegs got random bottle quests that allowed them to be turned in for over 1,000 gold each. And this speaks nothing to the numerous cosmetics added, allowing pirates to continue to differentiate themselves and show off their unique style not only in clothing, but in sails, hulls, and all of these various ship parts. And all purchasable things were kept cosmetic to always keep the playing field level for new players. So when I say Sea of Thieves is about the journey, I don't just mean from session to session and during gameplay. The whole game, right down to the development cycle, is all about the things that happen along the way.
To further my point, since I started work on this video, a massive update has already been announced with additions to the game like a PvP arena mode, harpoons for combat, loot gathering, and even risky sailing maneuvers, fishing, cooking, and even a story-centric series of quests with world building and lore to be discovered.
Now, I'm not trying to convince you that not loving Sea of Thieves is a crime in any way. More so, I want to shine a spotlight on how far the game has come, as well as how much effort the team has put into cultivating a very core theme.
Take one of the most recent additions as of the release of this video, the Wanderer's Refuge Reaper Voyage. This string of quests always takes place on the same cluster of 3 islands. and it happens in 5 separate parts, and 3 of those parts are always here, Wanderer's Refuge. In order to unlock and outfit your ship with the Reaper regalia, you and your crew have to complete this voyage 5 times, but the catch is that you need to be flying the Reaper flag while you undertake the quest. The Reaper flag makes your ship always visible on the map for everybody, essentially marking you as a vessel that's confident in taking on other crews in PvP encounters. The Reaper flag here is the spark to this voyage's gunpowder, leading to an explosion of tense treasure hunting while keeping an eye on the horizon for other Reaper ships attempting the same voyage. Or perhaps the scarier prospect of crews that are sailing under the radar and coming to send you to the bottom of the sea and steal the bounty of captain's chests you have on board. Maybe the ships don't want to fight, and a tenuous ceasefire will take place as you each work to unearth the spoils while steering clear of each other. Or maybe this peace is a ruse that can break at any moment once there's enough gold on the line. Or maybe you go completely unchallenged, collect all of the loot, and the second you sail away from the island, you're met with inky black water and towering tentacles, causing your whole crew to groan as they think about the 20,000 or so gold that might be ripped out from under them.
It's about the stories. It's all about the stories. And while I feel it's valid to think that there's not enough in this game to play past that first month of Game Pass, I want to call back to something earlier that I find important.
Remember when I said I was also feeling that the game was a little barren when I started playing, and that I would echo some of the points being passed around? Well, what changed? Was it the content additions? I mean, those helped for sure, no question about it, but that's not why I still play. Not really. What happened is, I realized that I was taking my experience from the game based off of what I expected it to be, and not what it was actually presenting to me. I had tunnel vision for the island, and by doing so, I largely ignored the ship. Now, I'm not going to be philosophical about this or anything, but I do genuinely feel that judging games for what they are not, rather than trying to understand them for what they are, is a bad habit that a lot of us have, myself included.
I'm not saying it's wrong if you didn't like Sea of Thieves, but I'd encourage everybody to take a second and reassess what it really has to offer. You might just find something that you didn't initially see. Of Thieves. And that's my one joke.
Thank you so much for watching through all this. Please follow me on Twitter or subscribe or any of that good stuff. If you like this and you want to support, you can drop me a few doubloons over on my Ko-fi, link below, probably. Dig into the description for it. It's a pirate joke too, right? I don't make stuff that often these days, so I decided to keelhaul the Patreon. I'm working on more stuff though, and thank you for everybody that's still coming back after 6 whole years from my first YouTube upload back on March 9th, 2013. Kind of crazy how time flies like that. Also, a big congratulations to Sea of Thieves on celebrating their first anniversary on March 20th. And thank you to the team at Rare for making my absolute favorite game of 2018. I really look forward to seeing all of you aspiring pirate legends out there on the waves. My name is Captain Sunder, and as always, I will see you next time. Peace.